The new CEO's voice cut through my office like a blade. Leave the building. 3 words. That's all it took to end 12 years of my career at Thornfield Industries. No explanation, no severance discussion. Just those 3 words and the security guard already standing at my door. What Vivian Ashcroft, our brand new CEO who'd been in the position for exactly 72 hours, didn't know was that I wasn't just another name on the payroll. I was Marcella Hayes, Senior Tax Compliance Manager, and I held the keys to every federal tax audit log this company had maintained since 2012. Every reconciliation, every disputed claim, every piece of documentation the IRS would want if they ever came knocking. And they were coming. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I knew because I'd been managing the correspondence for 6 months. But Vivian didn't ask about any of that. She didn't ask about the color-coded binders in my locked cabinet. She didn't ask about the encrypted files on my system. She didn't ask why I'd been scheduling weekly calls with our external audit team. She just wanted me gone. Before we go further into what happened next, there's something worth mentioning. This channel is building toward 5,000 subscribers. A community of people who understand that the most explosive stories in business aren't always on the front page of Forbes. They're in boardrooms, offices, and quiet moments when someone makes a catastrophic mistake. If that's the kind of truth worth following, the subscribe button is right there. No pressure, just an invitation. My name is Marcella Hayes, and I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Pittsburgh where my father worked the steel mills and my mother taught elementary school. We weren't poor, but we understood the value of every dollar. More importantly, we understood people. My mother used to say, empathy isn't feeling sorry for someone, it's understanding what they're carrying. That lesson shaped everything. When I became Senior Tax Compliance Manager at Thornfield Industries, I didn't just push papers and crunch numbers. I understood what those numbers meant for the 1,400 employees counting on this company to stay afloat. I understood what compliance meant, not just following rules, but protecting everyone who depended on this business staying legitimate, staying clean, staying operational. For 12 years, I'd done exactly that, until Vivian Ashcroft decided I was expendable. The morning Vivian arrived as CEO, I should have known something was off. She walked into the executive floor wearing a steel gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, carrying a leather portfolio that looked like it had never seen the inside of a normal office. She'd come from Blackstone Ventures, a private equity firm known for aggressive restructuring. The board had brought her in to optimize operations and increase shareholder value. Corporate speak for, cut everything that doesn't immediately generate profit. I'd prepared a briefing for her. 23 pages detailing our current tax compliance status, ongoing federal reviews, and the IRS audit scheduled for next quarter. I'd highlighted the critical items in yellow, the urgent items in orange, the absolutely cannot ignore items in red. Half the document was red. Her assistant, a young man named Kyle who looked fresh out of business school, accepted my briefing with a polite smile and promised Vivian would review it. That was Monday. Tuesday, I sent a follow-up email requesting a 30-minute meeting. No response. Wednesday, I walked to her office directly. Kyle informed me that Vivian was restructuring her calendar and would reach out to department heads when appropriate. Thursday, I received a meeting invitation. Finally, I thought. We'd discussed the audit, the documentation protocols, the fact that we had exactly 18 days before federal auditors would be sitting in our conference room. Friday morning, I walked into that meeting. Vivian sat behind her new mahogany desk. The old CEO's furniture had already been replaced, with Kyle standing slightly behind her right shoulder. No handshake, no pleasantries. Marcella Hayes, Senior Tax Compliance Manager, she said, reading from a document. Not a question, a confirmation. That's correct, I replied, already sensing the temperature in the room. Your department represents a significant operational expense with minimal revenue generation. My stomach dropped. Tax compliance isn't a revenue center. It's a protective function. We ensure the company remains. I've reviewed the organizational structure, she interrupted. Your role can be absorbed by our external accounting firm. They've confirmed they can handle compliance oversight at a fraction of your departmental budget. External firms don't have institutional knowledge, I said, keeping my voice level. They don't maintain the day-to-day documentation, the correspondence logs, the decision is made. Vivian's tone was ice. We're eliminating your position effective immediately. Kyle will escort you to HR for exit processing. There's an IRS audit scheduled for next month, I said. The words came out harder than I intended. I've been managing the preparation for 6 months. The auditors will need access to. Our external team will handle it. Vivian glanced at her computer screen, already moving on to her next task. Thank you for your service to Thornfield Industries. That's when she said it. Leave the building. Security guard. Cardboard box. The walk of shame past colleagues who wouldn't make eye contact. I'd seen this scene play out a dozen times during my tenure, other departments, other restructurings. I never thought I'd be the one carrying personal items past the reception desk, while everyone pretended to be deeply focused on their computer screens. But here's what Vivian Ashcroft didn't understand about tax compliance. It's not just about knowing the rules. It's about knowing where everything lives, the physical files, the digital archives, the external correspondence, the backup documentation that proves you've been operating in good faith. And I knew where all of it lived. Not because I was possessive or controlling, but because 12 years of institutional knowledge doesn't just evaporate because someone decides your position is non-essential. I knew that the 2018 equipment depreciation schedules were misfiled under 2019 in the auxiliary storage room. I knew that the correspondence with IRS agent Lawrence Whitmore about the disputed R&D tax credits was in a separate encrypted folder because it contained sensitive strategic information. I knew that the backup documentation for our international subsidiary tax treatment was split between 3 different systems because of a software migration in 2020 that was never properly reconciled. I knew all of this because it was my job to know. And I'd prepared a comprehensive transition document, 47 pages, detailing exactly where everything was, how to access it, and what would be needed for the upcoming audit. That document was sitting in my locked filing cabinet, in my office, which I no longer had access to. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, cardboard box on the passenger seat, trying to process what had just happened. My phone rang, unknown number. Marcella Hayes, a professional voice, female, slightly rushed. Speaking. This is Agent Elizabeth Hartman with the Internal Revenue Service. I'm calling to confirm our site visit scheduled for February 14th at 9 a.m. We'll need access to your compliance offices and the documentation we discussed in our previous correspondence. February 14th, 18 days away. Agent Hartman, I said slowly, I need to inform you that I'm no longer with Thornfield Industries as of today. My position was eliminated. Silence on the other end. Then, I see. Who should I contact regarding our audit? I honestly don't know. The new CEO made this decision. I assume they'll assign someone, or they mentioned using an external firm. More silence. Miss Hayes, you've been our primary contact for 6 months. We've discussed documentation requirements, access protocols, the specific items we'll be reviewing. Are you telling me there's no transition plan? There was no transition period. I was terminated this morning. I could hear Agent Hartman typing. I'll need to speak with someone in authority at Thornfield Industries immediately. This is highly irregular. You might try Vivian Ashcroft. She's the new CEO. We ended the call. I sat there, staring at the building where I'd spent 12 years of my life. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. They'd see. They'd realize what they'd done. But a larger part of me just felt tired. The weekend passed in a blur of resume updates and LinkedIn messages. By Monday, I'd already had 3 recruiters reach out. Tax compliance managers with my level of experience aren't exactly common. One position was actually offering a significant salary increase, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling about Thornfield Industries. Tuesday afternoon, my former colleague Adrienne called. We'd worked together for 8 years before she moved to the legal department. Marcella, what the hell happened? Her voice was stressed. Vivian is tearing the place apart. She's eliminated 4 more senior positions and consolidated 3 departments. That's what private equity restructuring looks like, I said. Maximize efficiency, minimize overhead. It's chaos. And there's something else. Adrienne lowered her voice. The IRS called this morning. They're still scheduled for Thursday. Vivian assigned Kyle to handle it. Kyle, her assistant, he's not a tax professional. He's barely been here a week. I know, he's been running around asking people where the audit files are. Nobody knows. Roger in accounting said you were the only one who maintained that stuff. My chest tightened. Did Kyle check my old office? Your office is being converted to a collaboration space. They cleared it out over the weekend. Cleared it out? Adrian, there were locked filing cabinets with original documentation in there. Please tell me they didn't just trash everything. I don't know. I saw facilities moving boxes to storage, but I don't know which storage or if they inventoried anything. This was bad, really bad. Has anyone tried to contact me? Officially? Not that I know of. Vivian seems to think the external accounting firm has everything under control. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. I spent the next hour debating with myself. They fired me. I owed them nothing. But 1,400 employees still worked there. People with families and mortgages and lives that depended on Thornfield Industries remaining solvent. I drafted an email to Vivian Ashcroft. Subject: IRS audit critical documentation. Miss Ashcroft, I understand my position has been eliminated, but I want to ensure a smooth audit process. I have comprehensive knowledge of where all required documentation is located and can provide a detailed transition brief. I'm available for consultation. Regards, Marcella Hayes, Professional. Helpful. Extending an olive branch. I hit send. No response Tuesday evening. No response Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon, Adrian texted me. Vivian told Kyle you're trying to make yourself seem important. She said the external firm confirmed they have everything needed. I stared at that text for a long time. All right then, Thursday, February 14th, 9 a.m. I was at home, 3 days into unemployment, drinking coffee and reviewing a job offer from a pharmaceutical company in Boston. My phone rang. Adrian. Marcella. Her voice was panicked. The IRS is here, 3 agents. They're asking for documentation that Kyle can't find. He's completely overwhelmed. Vivian is in her office on the phone, and I heard her screaming. Screaming about what? I couldn't hear everything, but something about assets and seizures and how this wasn't supposed to happen. My coffee went cold in my hand. Seizures? Adrian, what exactly is happening? I don't know. There are IRS agents in the conference room. Kyle is literally running between offices trying to find files. Someone from the external accounting firm is on speakerphone saying they only have the quarterly filings, not the detailed documentation. It's a complete disaster. This was worse than I thought. When the IRS conducts an audit and you can't provide documentation to support your tax positions, they don't just shrug and reschedule. They start with adverse assumptions. They disallow deductions. They assess penalties. And if they believe there's an attempt to obstruct the audit or hide information, they can take immediate enforcement action, including asset seizures to secure potential tax liabilities. How long have the agents been there? I asked. About an hour. Vivian just came out of her office. She looks, Marcella, I've never seen her look scared before. Is she asking about me? Kyle mentioned your name. She shut him down. Said we don't negotiate with terminated employees. There it was. Pride and ego, even in the middle of a crisis. Adrian, I need you to listen carefully. The documentation they're looking for is spread across multiple locations. The primary files should have been in my locked cabinet, but if facilities moved them to storage without inventory, they'll never find everything in time. The digital files are on the secure server under my old login, which has probably been deactivated. The external correspondence is in a separate system that requires specific access credentials. What should I tell them? Nothing. You're not in compliance. This isn't your responsibility. I paused. But you might want to update your resume. If this goes the way I think it's going, there are going to be a lot of people looking for jobs. We ended the call. I should have felt satisfaction. I'd tried to warn them. I'd offered to help. They'd chosen pride over pragmatism. But all I felt was sick. 10:47 a.m. Another call, this time from a number I didn't recognize but with a Chicago area code. Miss Hayes, this is Julian Brennan from Hartwell and Associates. The accounting firm Thornfield had contracted to replace my department. I apologize for calling out of the blue, but we have a situation. I've heard. Right, yes, well, he sounded flustered. We were contracted to handle quarterly filings and general compliance oversight. We were not informed there was an active IRS audit in progress requiring 6 months of prepared documentation. The scope of what they're requesting is extensive. That's because federal audits are extensive, I said. That's why I spent 6 months preparing. Miss Ashcroft indicated you were terminated and that we had full access to all necessary files. Miss Ashcroft has been CEO for less than a week. She doesn't know what files exist, where they are, or what the IRS needs. Julian exhaled slowly. Miss Hayes, I'm going to be direct. We're in a conference room with 3 IRS agents who are losing patience. We cannot locate approximately 60% of the documentation on their request list. They're discussing penalty assessments and potential fraud investigation protocols. Fraud investigation? That escalated faster than I expected. What triggered that? We can't provide documentation for R&D tax credits claimed in 2021 and 2022. The agents are suggesting those credits may have been fraudulent. My blood went cold. They weren't fraudulent. We had a full documentation package prepared by external specialists. It's in the auxiliary files under Federal Credits Research and Development. There should be 3 binders with original receipts, project descriptions, and qualified expense allocations. Where is this auxiliary file located? It was in my office. Storage room C, cabinet 7, 3rd shelf. But if facilities moved everything without inventory, I have no idea where it is now. Can you come in? Julian's voice cracked slightly. I know the circumstances are awkward, but this situation is deteriorating rapidly. I was terminated and ordered to leave the building by your client. I don't think I'm welcome. I understand, but a commotion in the background. Voices raised. Then Julian came back on the line. Miss Hayes, they're seizing assets. The IRS is initiating an emergency asset seizure to secure potential tax liability. I have to go. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, trying to process what I just heard. Asset seizure. They were actually seizing company assets. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Vivian Ashcroft. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Miss Hayes. Vivian's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the edge underneath. I need you to come to the office immediately. I was told to leave the building. Effective immediately, as I recall. This is an emergency situation. We need your expertise. You needed my expertise 5 days ago. You terminated me instead. I'm prepared to offer a consulting arrangement. Standard rates. Standard consulting rates for a tax compliance manager would be maybe $200 an hour. For what was happening, that was insultingly low. Miss Ashcroft, do you understand what's happening right now? There's a documentation issue with the IRS. We need you to help locate files. It's not a documentation issue. It's a catastrophic compliance failure. The IRS is seizing assets because they can't verify the legitimacy of your tax positions. Every minute this continues, you're accruing penalties and interest. Silence. Then, what do you want? There it was. The question I'd been unconsciously preparing for since I got that first call from Adrian. I didn't want revenge. That's not who I am. But I also wasn't going to let pride and short-sighted corporate restructuring destroy 12 years of my work and jeopardize 1,400 jobs. I need numbers, I said. What's the assessed tax liability the IRS is claiming? I heard papers rustling. Vivian's voice, muffled, asking someone in the background, then back to me. They're indicating potential disallowed deductions and credits totaling $8.3 million, with penalties and interest that could reach $15 million total. My stomach dropped. Jesus, how long have the agents been on site? 2 hours and 17 minutes. And how much is the asset seizure valued at? They've frozen our primary operating accounts. Our CFO estimates we're losing operational capacity at approximately $5,400 per minute. I did the math quickly. In the 2 hours they'd been there, that was already over $700,000 in frozen operational capacity. Every minute this dragged on, the damage compounded. Here's the situation, I said, keeping my voice level. I can resolve this. I know where every piece of documentation is, how to present it to satisfy IRS protocols, and how to demonstrate that the tax positions were taken in good faith with proper substantiation. I can have this audit back on track within 4 hours. What's your rate? This isn't about hourly rates. This is about fixing a crisis that should never have happened. Name your price, Miss Hayes. I thought about the 12 years I'd given to Thornfield Industries, the nights I'd stayed late making sure every filing was perfect, the weekends I'd spent organizing documentation, the institutional knowledge that couldn't be replaced by an external firm or a restructured department. I thought about being walked out by security with a cardboard box, and I thought about the 1,400 people who needed this company to survive. $2.4 million. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. That's absurd, Vivian finally said. That's less than 20% of the potential tax liability you're facing. It's less than 8 hours of operational losses at your current rate. And it's non-negotiable. I need to consult with the board. You have 15 minutes. Every minute you delay costs you $5,400 in frozen operations, plus accruing penalties with the IRS. Do the math. I ended the call. My hands were shaking. I just demanded $2.4 million from a company that fired me 5 days ago. But the number wasn't arbitrary. It was calculated. It was fair compensation for the value I was providing and the crisis I was solving. And it sent a message. Institutional knowledge and expertise have value. You don't get to discard people and then expect them to save you for standard consulting rates. 12 minutes later, my phone rang. Vivian Ashcroft. We accept your terms. $2.4 million, contingent on successful resolution of the IRS audit. No, I said. Payment up front. Wire transfer to my account before I walk into that building. And I need it in writing from your general counsel. That's not how consulting agreements work. This isn't a consulting agreement. This is crisis remediation. You're buying my knowledge and my expertise to fix a problem you created. If you want someone to negotiate with, call another tax compliance manager. I'll wait while you find one who knows your documentation systems as well as I do. Another long silence. I'll have our counsel draft the agreement. How quickly can you get here? 30 minutes after, I see the wire transfer confirmation. The agreement came through 18 minutes later. 6 pages of legal language that boiled down to: Marcella Hayes would provide expert consultation to resolve the current IRS audit situation in exchange for $2.4 million, paid immediately. I read it 3 times, signed it electronically, sent it back. 22 minutes later, my phone pinged with a notification from my bank. Wire transfer received. $2,400,000. I stared at that number for a solid minute. Then I got dressed, got in my car, and drove to Thornfield Industries. The lobby was chaos. Employees clustered in small groups, whispering. Someone from it was arguing with a man in a dark suit who I assumed was IRS. Kyle was on the phone, looking like he might cry. I walked straight to the elevator. Roger from accounting spotted me. Marcella, what are you doing here? Fixing things. The executive floor was worse. Vivian stood outside the main conference room with her arms crossed, talking intensely with a woman in a gray blazer, probably the attorney. Julian from the external accounting firm was inside the conference room with 3 IRS agents who looked progressively more irritated. Vivian saw me approaching. Her expression was unreadable. Miss Hayes. Miss Ashcroft. I kept my voice professional. I assume the IRS agents have been informed I'm joining this discussion. Julian has briefed them. They're not happy about the delay. They're about to be a lot happier. I walked past her into the conference room. 3 agents, 2 men, 1 woman. The woman was Agent Elizabeth Hartman, who I'd been corresponding with for months. She looked exhausted. Agent Hartman, I said, extending my hand. Marcella Hayes, I apologize for the confusion this morning. Miss Hayes. She shook my hand, her grip firm. I was told you were no longer with the company. I'm not. I'm here as an independent consultant to facilitate this audit. I understand there are documentation concerns. That's putting it mildly. One of the male agents, his nameplate read Agent R. Sullivan, tapped a thick folder. We've been requesting basic substantiation for claim deductions for 2 hours. We've received incomplete files, misfiled documents, and a lot of excuses. I understand. That's going to change right now. I pulled out my laptop and powered it up. Agent Hartman, can you provide me with your current request list? She slid a 4-page document across the table. I scanned it quickly. R&D tax credits, equipment depreciation schedules, international subsidiary tax treatment, charitable contribution substantiation, employee benefit plan documentation. All of it was documented. All of it was filed. I knew exactly where every piece was. "Give me 90 minutes," I said. "I'll have every item on this list ready for your review, properly organized and cross-referenced." Agent Sullivan looked skeptical. "We've been told that for 2 hours. You've been told that by people who don't know the filing systems. I designed the filing systems. 90 minutes. Agent Hartman studied me for a moment. "We'll give you 2 hours. But Miss Hayes, we need complete documentation. If we can't verify these positions, we're proceeding with disallowance and penalty assessment." "Understood." I left the conference room and went straight to Vivian. "I need access to storage room C, the secure server, and my old office if anything is still there." "Your office was cleared. The files were moved to auxiliary storage." "Which auxiliary storage?" "I don't know. Kyle handled it." I found Kyle in his temporary office, looking shell-shocked. "Kyle, the files from my office, where are they?" Facilities moved them. I think basement storage, or maybe the off-site warehouse. I didn't supervise it directly. This was going to be harder than I thought. I spent the next hour executing what was essentially an archaeological dig through Thornfield Industries' documentation systems. Storage room C, still intact, thank God. I found the R&D tax credit binders exactly where I'd left them. 3 inches of documentation supporting $4.2 million in claimed credits. Project descriptions, qualified expense allocations, third-party specialist certification. Everything the IRS needed. Basement storage, chaos, unlabeled boxes stacked haphazardly. I found equipment depreciation schedules mixed in with old marketing materials. 40 minutes of sorting before I located the complete depreciation documentation. Secure server. My old login was deactivated, but it restored my access credentials. I pulled the international subsidiary tax files, correspondence with foreign tax authorities, transfer pricing documentation, treaty position analyses. The off-site warehouse was the worst. Facilities had moved my filing cabinets without inventory. I literally had to open each drawer, identify the contents, and extract what I needed. But I found it. Employee benefit plan documentation. Charitable contribution receipts with proper acknowledgement letters. 2 hours and 12 minutes after I'd started, I walked back into the conference room with 6 organized binders, a USB drive with digital files, and a cross-referenced index. "Agent Hartman, Agent Sullivan," I said, distributing materials. "Complete documentation supporting all positions under review." Agent Hartman opened the first binder, R&D tax credits. She flipped through pages, her expression shifting from skepticism to relief. "This is what we needed 2 months ago when we sent our information request," she said. "This is what you would have received if there had been proper transition planning," I replied diplomatically. They spent the next 90 minutes reviewing everything. I sat quietly, available for questions, providing clarification when needed. Finally, Agent Hartman closed the last binder. "Miss Hayes, this documentation is comprehensive and well-organized. It supports the tax positions as filed." Agent Sullivan nodded. "We'll need to take copies for our review file, but preliminarily this addresses our concerns." "What about the asset seizure?" I asked. "We'll initiate the release process immediately. The freeze should be lifted within 2 hours." Vivian, who had been sitting in the corner looking progressively more relieved, actually exhaled audibly. "However," Agent Hartman continued, "we need to address the systemic issues that led to today's situation. The lack of documentation availability, the absence of a qualified compliance manager, the reliance on external firms without proper knowledge transfer, these are red flags." "I agree completely," I said. "And those are concerns for Thornfield Industries leadership to address." The IRS agents gathered their materials and left. The conference room fell silent. Julian from the external accounting firm was the first to speak. "Miss Hayes, that was extraordinary. I've never seen someone navigate an audit crisis that efficiently." "It's not extraordinary when you know the systems and you've done the work," I said. "It's just competence." I looked at Vivian. The audit is resolved, the asset seizure will be lifted, your operational losses will stop. We're done here. I stood to leave. Miss Hayes, Vivian said. Wait, I turned. I made a mistake. Those 4 words probably cost her more than the $2.4 million. You made several mistakes, I said quietly. You eliminated a position without understanding its function. You ignored warnings from someone with institutional knowledge. You let pride prevent you from accepting help when it was offered. And it cost this company significant operational losses, reputational damage, and $2.4 million to fix. I want to offer you your position back, with a 40% salary increase and a seat in senior leadership meetings. It was tempting. It really was. But I thought about how it felt to be walked out by security. How my offer to help was dismissed as an attempt to make myself seem important. How my 12 years of work was valued at 0 until crisis struck. No, I said. Thank you, but no. Why not? Because institutional knowledge works both ways, Miss Ashcroft. I know this company's systems, but I also know its culture now. I know how leadership treats people when they're deemed non-essential. And I know that the next time you're looking to cut costs, I'll be on the list again, regardless of what I contribute. I picked up my laptop bag. Good luck with your restructuring. I'd recommend keeping detailed documentation of everything. 3 weeks later, I accepted a position as Director of Tax Compliance at Lexington Pharmaceuticals in Boston. 30% higher salary than I'd made at Thornfield. Comprehensive benefits, and leadership that understood the difference between cost centers and protective functions. But the real change was the $2.4 million sitting in my investment account. I didn't spend it lavishly. I paid off my mortgage, set up college funds for my nieces and nephews, donated a significant amount to my mother's old elementary school for their financial literacy program, and I kept enough invested to know that I would never again be in a position where I had to accept being undervalued. Adrienne called me a month after the audit incident. You're not going to believe this, she said. Vivian eliminated 3 more senior positions last week: the head of quality control, the facilities manager, and the senior legal counsel. How's that going for her? We failed a surprise FDA inspection yesterday because nobody knew where the current compliance protocols were documented. The quality control director had been managing that. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt sad. How are you doing? I asked. I'm updating my resume. Half the senior staff is gone, morale is terrible, and there's a rumor that Blackstone Ventures is looking to flip the company within the next year. You'll land on your feet. You're good at what you do. So were you, but you were smart enough to make them pay for realizing it. We talked for a while longer, catching up, sharing industry gossip. After we hung up, I thought about that phrase. Make them pay for realizing it. That wasn't quite right. I didn't make them pay for realizing my value. I made them acknowledge that expertise, institutional knowledge, and competence have market value. That you can't eliminate someone on Friday and expect them to save you on Monday for standard consulting rates. That people aren't disposable assets to be discarded during restructuring and retrieved during crisis. 6 months later, I saw a news item about Thornfield Industries being acquired by a larger conglomerate. Vivian Ashcroft had moved on to another private equity opportunity. The workforce had been reduced by 35%. Some of my former colleagues reached out. Many had found new positions. Some were still looking. The institutional knowledge that had made Thornfield Industries successful for decades was now scattered across a dozen companies, all because someone decided that tax compliance was non-essential. I think about that sometimes when I'm training my new team at Lexington Pharmaceuticals. I make sure they understand not just what we do, but why it matters. I document everything and make sure multiple people have access to critical information. I advocate for my team in budget meetings and strategic planning sessions. And when leadership asks about cost optimization, I show them exactly what value we provide and what it would cost to recover from our absence. Because I learned something from Vivian Ashcroft, though not the lesson she intended to teach. I learned that expertise has a price, and crisis has a much higher one.